See, my fight choreography probably sucks. I really don't know what I'm doing. But if you're going to make a war film or some sort of action film, make sure you hire somebody that knows what they're doing when it comes to fight choreography. Sometimes I go into a movie knowing absolutely nothing about it. Sometimes it works out great, sometimes it doesn't. And this one is more in the doesn't side, unfortunately. However, this was a very interesting story. I learned quite a bit. If it was all factual, which I can guarantee you, this was not all factual. First off, the first dumb thing that I saw in this movie was somebody's house was getting stormed by some enemies, and the man in the house is like, hey, all the women and children, go hide, get out of here, we'll take care of these invaders. The women and children go and hide behind this wall where they just squat down and they're behind the wall, and all these invaders come in and can't find these people. I was just like, oh, okay. One other thing this movie didn't do too well was time jump. Sometimes it would be in the forward 5 years, sometimes it'd be back a little bit, sometimes it'd be forward. I wish they would have just told this movie straight through. It looked like this warrior queen, Rani, just all of a sudden one day was this amazing warrior. It really didn't show much of her path to becoming a hero at all. There was no hero journey here, and that's what this movie needed pretty desperately. She becomes queen, and she's saying because the armies are so short on men, the women are the ones that are going to have to pick up the slack, and they're showing the women train, and it looks terrible. They all look like they were play fighting, at least most of them. I was just like, oh boy, I hope when they get to an actual fight scene, it doesn't look like they're play fighting, and they were! Oh, it was so hard to watch. I wanted to enjoy this movie so much more. There's a scene where they're closing the doors to the fort. They're closing the doors, and a couple of the women are literally playing like this. They're just like, hey, okay, we're gonna fight here. All right, let's fight with our swords. The other thing I didn't like was when the women actually did have to fight hand-to-hand with some British soldiers. The British soldiers looked like they were just running to their deaths. The women were just clack, clack, clack. And the British soldiers were just blah, like they were like worse than the red shirts from Star Trek. They were worse than the Power Putties from Power Rangers. I was just like, oh man. And there's this one other scene, I don't know if this happens in real life, but so Rani's husband dies, so she becomes a widow. And I guess in India, it's tradition that when you become a widow, you shave your head. And she's sitting in this room, and there's about 40 women in there, and they're all wailing and crying and screaming. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I'm wrong here, I know, but I was just like, oh my gosh, stop. Like, if this was happening in real life, I would have to cover my ears and leave. But they were screaming and crying, and they were all so distraught. I don't know if it were probably over their own husbands and now Ronnie's husband, and they were, oh my gosh, I was like, shut up. But then Ronnie was like, I'm not shaving my head. And then they all just stopped. They all just immediately stopped wailing and crying. And I was like, okay, women, you must not have meant it at all. So there's this scene where she's talking to her nephew who they have tried to adopt as their son. She's telling him, oh, I'm your mom, you're my son, or something. She's giving him some sort of pep talk, mother-son talk. And she's all smiling and happy and talking. And then, like, right before the scene cuts off, I swear this scene cut off a half a second too late. Because she was talking, giving him advice, and she's, like, happy, and she's like, you know, things will be great. You gotta act like a prince. Yep, and that's what you have to do. It was like, she was happy, and then just for the half second, they should have cut that half second out, because I was like, what just happened? She just was angry about something. What did she freak out about just now? So this is one of those times when I just don't know much about India or its customs, and they didn't explain in the movie what was going on here. So Ellis is this British major who's like attached to Jhansi and talks to Rani, and like the liaison between the British, the trading company, and Jhansi. She's walking along and she trips, and then he goes to save her. She like catches herself really quick, and then he like takes like 2 steps back, like he just offended her big time. And she looks back at him like, what are you doing? And I was like, what's the big deal? I thought he was just being a nice guy right there. I don't know. Is it tradition in India for women to just fall, and if you're a man you can't catch them? Or is this a royalty thing? I don't know. If you know, please leave in the comments below and let everybody know. There's a part in this movie also where the army is marching, the British army is marching along, and the steps are not in sync to the marching in the movie, and they're not even marching in sync in the movie. Cause they kind of are, but they're not really. So that's dumb. So, unless I was just seeing things. Maybe I need to see that again. There is a scene in this movie where Rani and a couple of her generals are planning out their next attack against the British. Another general, somebody, comes in and says, I need to talk to you in private, Rani. They literally take like 5 steps away to have their private conversations. I was like, why? They could hear them. It's not private at all. Now, I have never been in this type of war. I've never been in cavalry and foot soldier type of war or battle. There's a scene where there's infantrymen on the high ground, and there's a bunch of cavalry on the low ground. The cavalry starts charging the infantry, and the infantrymen, with their rifles, mind you, they run down the hill to fight the cavalry. They were up there on top of the hill. They could have stood up there and just shot down at the cavalry, but the cavalry was charging. They're up here and they're just running down the hill. I don't know how many times I'm gonna say this because it was so dumb. They couldn't have made the British look any stupider in any way. They could have just sat up there and shot down at the cavalry, but they ran down and then they took position and then they fired. But some of them just charged. I'm not sure why they did that. I don't know. I would never just run at a horse unless I had a spear, like a pike or something. I thought that's what was going to happen. But no, just a whole bunch of foot soldiers ran from their advantage on the hill. And the hill wasn't even something the horses could run up. The hill was like staggered and steep. Oh, Warrior Queen of Jhansi, I wanted to love you so much, but sometimes maybe the movie needed to hire a better fight or war choreographer or something. In the end of this movie, they say that nobody knows what happens to Rani, this warrior queen. Nobody knows. She may have died. She may have went in the water. She may have just showed up at battles sometimes. So at the beginning of this movie it says based on a true story. And at the end it says we have no idea what happened to this woman. It's just like, okay. This should have been a documentary like Harriet, or this, I don't know. Movies are dumb sometimes. Would love this movie to be remade. Making movies is really hard. I get it. I know. I've tried to make a few myself. It's hard. There's a lot of things to factor in. But if you're going to have a movie that's going to be released in actual theaters, I think you need to do as much as you can to make sure your movie is not dumb sometimes. And thank you for watching Movies Are Dumb Sometimes and our talk about Warrior Queen and of Jhansi. I learned probably quite a bit, and I'm more interested in this time period, in this area of history now. So that's cool. That's probably the main point of the film, but I think I would have rather had a documentary here with how irregular this movie was. So if you liked Movies Are Dumb Sometimes, make sure to check out some of our other videos. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Movies Are Dumb Sometimes, on Twitter at Movies Are Dumb S, or go ahead and subscribe here, like, and if you saw it, please comment below. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Thanks. Dang, that was a long talk.